Welcome to the Campus Fellowship Podcast. This is an episode where we seek to highlight for you an interview with a student and their testimony that we think will be a blessing to your life. My name is Jacob Bennett, and I serve as the Executive Director of Campus Fellowship, which exists to equip local churches to implement and sustain dynamic college ministries whose students worship God and change the world. We got Mel today. She's running the mixer, and she'll chime in with questions every now and then if she has a question she wants to ask. But namely, today we have with us Patricio Garcia. Welcome, Patricio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Patricio is from our Simpson group. And Simpson, you guys started like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So is this the second year? Or is this is the third year? Third year. Third year of Simpson crew. Yeah. So this is like a little icebreaker, a little get to know you, a little like just kind of have some fun. Okay.
All right.
How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay. So first up, we have AI. AI, or two truths and a lie.
So I have to choose one.
You have to choose one.
I'm not a big AI person, so I'll choose the two truths and a lie.
Okay, two truths and a lie. So, Patricio, we kind of know each other, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so this game, have you played Two Truths and a Lie?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so we're gonna play the game Two Truths and a Lie.
All
So,
right.
I'll start us off because I knew this was coming. I kind of made the categories.
Yep.
And we're going to see if we can stump each other. So,
right.
you can say I'm going to say two things that are true about me and one thing that's a lie. And those three things are not going to be in that order. And then you'll just have to try to figure out which one of those things is a lie.
All right.
So, Patricio, one thing about me that you may not know is that I went to school at a zoo. Also, Patricio, you may not know that I don't use shampoo. For the record, for people not able to be in the room, I'm a bald man.
Okay.
And finally, Patricio, I play hockey.
I'm gonna go with the obvious one, I think, and say the lie is that you went to school at a zoo.
No. I went to school at the School of Environmental Studies in Minnesota, which is located in Apple Valley, on the property of the Minnesota Zoo.
Really?
Yeah. It's only for juniors and seniors, so it's only the last 2 years of my high school career. And it was in a separate building. Like it's on Minnesota Zoo property, but it's on its own separate building because it has to be separated by a fence in case the animals get out, But for any class we had, you could always go over to the zoo. Like photography, you want to take photos of the animals? Great, you just walk on over to the zoo and you take photos of the animals. Yeah. So
That's
lots
crazy.
of other things about that, but yep. No, I
So-
do use shampoo.
Oh, that's crazy. For your beard?
And I do play hockey. Well, no, even just for my head. It's amazing.
Oh.
Shampoo, it's helpful for even bald people.
That's...
Yeah.
And I would have never thought of that.
All right, Patricio,
All right.
your turn.
My middle name is Alexander. When I was younger, I fell and chipped my tooth, and it didn't grow back. I've lit my house up with a car battery before.
I think you didn't chip your tooth.
You're wrong.
Oh!
Yup. No, I did chip my tooth.
Okay.
So, when I was younger, I was playing with my cousin. I don't even know what we were playing,
Mhm.
but my grandma had a metal bed, and I fell, and I chipped my tooth, and we thought it was okay after a while,
Mhm.
and we went to the dentist, and they said like, it should be fine, it should grow back, but it turned out that the tooth had broken inside my gum, and so it wasn't allowing my other tooth to grow out.
Oh.
And so, yeah, for a while I just didn't have a tooth. I had to get surgery.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So wait, what's the lie then?
The lie was the car battery one.
Oh, okay.
But it's
Man,
tricky.
I was like totally thinking that was absolutely true.
It is tricky because I didn't light my house up, but I did light. So one time we didn't have over the weekend, so they had cut our lights.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the weekend we didn't have light. And so we connected like a little light bulb and put it in the kitchen next
to like one car battery.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was like, there has to be a little bit of truth in that, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, no.
And your middle name is actually Alexander?
Yeah, it is Alexander.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, Patricio Alexander Garcia, why don't you share your testimony with us? How did you become a Christian? How did you come to know Christ?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with a little bit of background. I grew up in a Catholic home.
Mm-hmm.
I went to church semi-often when I was younger. I would, go with my grandma or my mom. My dad, he was actually atheist,
Mm-hmm.
so he didn't believe in God at all.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a sort of like divided home in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But when my dad left, I was like 8, and then my mom, she transferred us to a Catholic school, and so we started going to Catholic school. I started, getting more involved with, I guess, my faith, so to speak. I was very confused as to if I believed in God or not.
Mm.
I used to pray. I think prayer has been always present in my life. I always believed in God, not like believed God was real, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe not like believed in God. Like I never had faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up with a very like normal mindset of, well, my sins aren't that bad, I lied a couple
Mhm.
times,
Yeah.
just the normal things like, oh, well. And then in Catholic church there's confession, and so it's just like, okay, I gotta think about when I lied or when I said something mean to my sister, and then just confess it and I'm good.
Mm.
And so, yeah, growing up, I was very much just, I used to pray, and that was the main expression of my faith. Going to church was boring to me. I didn't really want to go. And it wasn't like I never felt like community with church. Like that was
Mhm.
really something that was highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, going into high school, just some rougher things were happening in my household, and so I was like, I was really struggling to grasp, like God is real, and so I was after my junior year of high school, I was definitely, I knew I was not a Christian. Like I was like, I believe that there is a God. I just didn't think I could know which God is the true God.
Yeah.
And so I looked into other forms of faith or religion.
Yeah.
I remember I saw a music video where somebody was wearing, I think, Muslim attire,
Mm-hmm.
like religious attire, and I was like, that's really cool. And so I started investigating about that, but I didn't really find anything that was, like calling to me. And then I looked into, my friend, he was very like stoicism and like philosophy type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was really entranced by that for a while. But junior year of high school was, I would say, the tipping point of my, at least my younger life, for sure.
Right.
We left my mom's boyfriend at the time, and he was just, there was just a lot of things where our family dynamic was getting worse and worse and worse. And I have a younger sister, which is actually his daughter, and the reason we left, she was like threatening to take her away, and so it was just a lot of uncertainty at that time, and it was over the summer too.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really worrying about school.
Yeah.
But school was coming back up, and I was just, I thought I was just gonna have to grow up, go to work, start just going to the workforce, provide for my family. Sort of back to that same mindset I had when my dad had left when I was younger. Like, I'm the man of the house. I gotta take care of this.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things that weren't necessarily with my mental health weren't good. Like, I would say I was becoming a lot like my mom's boyfriend at the time. And so it was really hard for me to get out of that sort of I'm right mindset.
Yeah.
And so I think it started to crack at my pride, but I wanted to cling on to it. And I think as I grew up in high school, the big thing was hip hop, rap music.
Okay, yeah.
And so I loved rap music.
Yeah.
But I became very engrossed in a lot of the more like gangster rap is the category of music.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was not so much the violent aspect, it was more so the prideful aspect. Like, you don't have this, or I have more control over this, things like that. And so it really fed my pride. And to some degree, I would say that rap was my God before.
Okay.
Before I came to know Christ. It was like what I valued the most. And so... And
the messages just like spoke to you.
Yep. I felt like it was just... It's like, as I got more... like, became more aware of how, like, good it felt to be, like, prideful. Like, the more I tried to cling on to it. And so, after that summer, I went back to school because my mom forced me to. She was like, you have to go to school, you know. And so, I went to school. I felt very isolated to some degree. Like, nobody knows that, like, I'm going through more than them, sort of thing.
Got it, yeah.
And so, I felt like that was just more pride. And it's almost like, oh, well, I'm suffering, like, almost like an adult versus like a child. And so... Is
it like you were thinking, like, none of you guys can identify with me at all?
Yeah.
I'm experiencing a world that you guys... It's like you're little children.
Yeah, I felt like on a different plane than them. And so after school... that senior year, I got really involved in just drinking and smoking and going out with friends. And I was working construction. And so I was making my money during the week, splurging it all on the weekend, going back. So, and most construction workers that I worked with did basically the same thing, or they saved up so that they could do that same thing later on.
Yeah.
And so... it was very...
I play hockey with a bunch of people who are in that kind of lifestyle.
Yep. It's a very common lifestyle, I would say, especially among like older people. Like, oh, you know, gotta make money for the family, and then on the weekends we can do what we like. Yeah. But yeah, I was very much in that scene with my friends. We'd go out, and then my friend Esmeralda, she's a big part of my testimony, just because she's always been a good friend to me. Yeah. And even like throughout high school, we didn't talk as much as, because we knew each other since middle school, and we didn't talk like that much during high school. But she always checked in on me, and so that summer, she checked in because she was like kind of worried for me. She was like, "This is not you. Like, you're not usually like this." And so, at this point, I felt like it wasn't really changing my situation, like being, like, just having that, like, instant gratification. And so I was like, I was very open to just what she was saying. I was like, it's true that I don't really feel like accomplished or anything through this.
So she was like confronting you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She was like, yeah, I'm just worried. She's like,
Yeah.
like, you're not one to be out drinking late at night, especially like as much as I was doing.
So where did it go from there? So she confronts you, and
Yeah.
where does that go?
So it sort of goes nowhere.
Okay.
For a while.
Okay.
I was just like, yeah, I guess I gotta be more careful about what Esmeralda knows. That's all I thought.
Make sure I don't get a talking to from my friend again.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was a little bit more careful in terms of, you know, the friends that I would go out with, because they would tell her or something.
Okay.
And so I tried to avoid it, definitely, for a while.
Yeah.
And then she would invite me to church, and I would go sometimes. And she's dating my friend John, and so we would like see each other every so often.
Mm-hmm.
And so, right before Simpson started, right before college, it was gonna be our welcome week for freshmen, and she was like, "Oh well, there's this retreat. It was a Catholic retreat. It was like a healing retreat, and so." She was like, I think it'd be really good. Like, my mom went, my dad went, and her dad actually stopped drinking after he went. And so I went instead of going to Welcome Week for Simpson. And so that weekend, I went to the retreat. It was all right. It was a good retreat. But I remember I left, and then I just went back to the same thing. And I sort of I felt like I was wearing like a mask. Like,
Yeah.
I just went and did that, and now I'm doing the same thing again. So it's kind of pointless. And
So when did that change?
Yeah. That's a good question. I would definitely say that started it. For sure.
Yeah.
I think that started it. Yeah, just seeing, because she doesn't have all, like, my friend Esmeralda doesn't really have all the answers, so to speak, or at least at the time, like, but she was still very faithful, and she was, like, always directing me to God, even though she necessarily didn't do that in, like, whatever way was best at the time. Like, she just knew I needed God, and that was about it. Like, she didn't tell me, oh, you should read this or read this. She was just like, hey, you should, like, pray, you should go to church, like, and so I think that was definitely a good thing to have. Second semester, I had class with Frankie, which I know is a common face around here.
Yeah, a lot of people know Frankie. Yeah.
And so I met Frankie in my Spanish class. I actually never talked to her at first. Like, I was not talking to anybody.
Do you not know Spanish?
I do.
I'm just kidding.
and so I remember my friend Victor. He's been going to Simpson with me.
Yeah.
And most things I would do would be because of him. He'd be like, hey, we should go do this. And I was like, okay. And so he was like, hey, there's this, like, religious thing, like a service, but they're going to play volleyball afterwards. And I was like, bet. I was like, I'll go. And he's like, yeah, I don't really know what it is. but they're playing volleyball. And I was like, okay. And I was very confused, like, what was going on. And I remember the day of, it was a midweek.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, midweek is like the service that we have for campus fellowship. And so often people would go volleyball afterwards. But that day, I fell asleep right before. I woke up like 5 minutes before 8. I was super groggy. I got to midweek, and I saw Frankie there, and I was like, "Oh, like, what's up, Frankie?" And she was like, "Hey, like, how you doing? It's so good to see you here." And then after the service was done, I think I met Chris, just like shook his hand, but I was very groggy. I was very out of it. It felt kind of surreal. Like, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And so,
bit of a dream world.
Yep. And so I was like, are we gonna play volleyball? And Victor was like, oh no, they said there's no volleyball today.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. And so I went home. But after that's when I started to talk with Frankie a little bit more in class. And I remember she told me that they were having a Valentine's Day event.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, yeah, I know the guys are doing something different. So if you want to get in like touch with Chris, like just talk about it, see if you want to go or not. And I was like, sure. And I remember I actually met up with Chris the day of the Valentine's Day event. And yeah, he asked me a couple questions. I remember for sure, like, are you a Christian? And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, obviously I knew.
Right,
I knew
right.
the crowd I was walking into, and so I was like, yeah. And
Don't
so,
you know I'm around Christians? Of course,
yeah, bro.
of course I'm a Christian.
I was like, yeah, I would say so. I was like, and so I don't remember the extent of our conversation.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
she was like, yeah, we're gonna do something for Valentine's Day. If you want to go, just have dress shirt, pants, whatever.
Yep.
And I was like, bet. And I was sort of considering not going, but I was like, shit, I want to go. Like, there's nothing holding me back, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went. After that, I started just meeting up with Chris, and just, yeah, he had a lot of heavy-hitting questions, like, how do you get into heaven?
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was shocked that I knew absolutely nothing. I was like, I grew up Catholic, and so I felt like I should know a lot more answers than I did.
Mm.
And one of those was, how many sins does it take for you to deserve hell? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know there was a magical number. I guess I never thought about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, that was just one of those things, like, just enough, I guess.
Yeah. And for clarity, for everyone listening, how many sins does it take to deserve hell?
Yeah, it takes only one.
Yeah, yeah.
It takes only one.
I know.
And I was like, sort of confused. I guess I never really understood what hell meant, or even sin was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just there was a lot of fundamentals we had to go over.
Yeah.
And when I finally realized, like, just the root of everything is our relationship with God, and how it was broken since the beginning. Like, we are flawed, and like we will always fail.
Mm-hmm.
Like, apart from Him, like we'll just continue to do our, like, live in our sin, essentially. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I was very taken aback. I think there was a big part of me that realized that I was going to hell, even before that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes back to that pride thing. Yeah, I think it was easier to accept that I was a sinner than grace. The grace that God gives so freely to us.
Got it.
And so I think I struggled. That was the wrestling that I had for a while, just accepting grace.
Yeah, because you knew from that conference way long ago, like, I need a change, and I can't, and I'm just gonna wear a mask, the rest of my life. But so that part was easy to accept for you, right?
Yep.
But it was the actually accepting grace part that was hard. So what was the offer of grace in your that God made to you that was like, I just can't pass that up anymore? Well, what did that look like?
Yeah, I would say, like, that God actually cares about me. And so, like, and he sent His Son to die for me, and it was just like, there's no dangling this over my head, as in, I think growing up it was, I do something good, I hold this over your head, like, hey, remember what I did for you. If I screwed up, it was more like, it wasn't a kind, loving, hey, like, I do all this because I love you or whatever. It was like, hey, I did this, you better get your act straight. And that was more so from people who I definitely feared, or, like, understood that they had more, like, power over me. And so I was very uncomfortable with that. And so knowing that, okay, if I accept this, like this is something that's God has done for me, like God himself. And so it was like such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was hard at first. But I think somebody who like really helped me was Allison Edwards, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked with her whenever I could, whenever we saw each other. And I think she just really showed me like God's heart for me. And I think it was just like, if God so willingly and like actually like is pleased to do this for me, like how could I ever like let that go? Yeah. And so I think that was what really like finalized, like cemented it for me.
Yeah. See, hearing you talk about it just reminds me how it says in the scriptures that God was pleased to crush his son.
Yeah.
And that just, it blows my mind to think that it was for pleasure, like in the sense like he was pleased because he knew that it was bringing many sons into the kingdom. That God has that kind of love for us, that he'd sacrifice himself through the cross. That is amazing. And I think you're right. I think it is hard to accept for a lot of people because it's like, well, that means I just can't earn my way, and that means I have to change too. But it seems like that the moment you realize that, it was like you had maybe a new heart that like now it's like I want to change, and I can change.
Yeah, I think change has been something I've struggled with for sure.
Yeah.
And I struggled a lot to stop vaping.
Mm-hmm.
Because I tried to pull back from everything else just because vaping was easily accessible and it was like I could still do everything while doing that. And so it was super hard for me at first. I was like, I'll just leave it tomorrow or the day after. And so my friend Grace actually, she found my vape and she was like, hey, I think you should stop vaping. And I was like, yeah, I do want to. It's just hard. And I remember I told her, next time I see you, I'll stop. and so I stopped vaping, and it was hard.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I actually stopped everything altogether. Like I knew where I was at, and I knew one would lead to the other.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. And I was very determined that I don't want to live the life that I was living apart from Christ. Yeah. And so I think that was my main motivation to leave everything. Yeah. And she was a great help for that. Yeah. She kept me accountable, like, hey, how you been doing with that? Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's like, it's a testimony that the love of Christ changes us, you know. And so, I mean, Patricio, I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing how God has changed your life, so many different things from your past that were hard and difficult, and even like in coming to Christ, they're just, you know, not everything was perfect in your life, but it's like he changes you over time. That is a wonderful like way to think about it, and how he changes our hearts and changes our desires. So so thank you so much, Patricio. Listeners, if you found this encouraging, please subscribe, give us a rating on your podcast app, and while you're at it, don't waste your time. Get involved today in a campus group or a campus ministry.